At 12:06 a.m., November 1st, 1963, I rolled a reel marked Holiday on Ice, Indianapolis. 1 millimeter of tape on Gate C refused to behave. That's the whole story I came to watch. Hey, thanks for being here. I keep the lamp low and tell true stories quietly. Tonight, I'm walking through notes, timestamps, and the small details you notice before and after an event, with names and facts exactly as the record shows, presented respectfully and non-graphically. Settle in, breathe with me, and let the rhythm do its work. If you're awake, tell me your city plus local time in the comments. If something sounds familiar or you have a source I should see, add it below. I read everything. If sleep shows up, let it. The reel cans were dented and chalked by a steady hand. Holiday on Ice, 10/31/63. He turned one until dust ringed his sleeve. The wall clock read 12:06 a.m. The archive hummed with old fluorescent light. He eased the lid. The paper leader crackled once. The viewer's lamp rose just enough for sprockets to bite. Counter to 0, slate, crowd blur, ice glare. He boxed Coliseum, underlined row H, and steadied his pencil for the night. The table was unvarnished oak with a cigarette scorch near one corner, a relic from older shifts. He stacked envelopes, usher reports, concession tallies, a stage door counter tag tied with dull string. The mercury strip read 64 degrees, sir. He copied it beside the clock time. The fan in the viewer whispered in a small, even way. He brushed grit from the gate with a camel hair swab and kept the lamp low to spare the acetate. He titled the legal pad, Coliseum, 10/31/63, review copy. 2 blank lines waited for corrections. To the right, a small box read, row H, with Gate C penciled beside it from an earlier note. He squared the pad with a ruler so each entry would land in a clean column. The discipline wasn't ceremony, it prevented drift. He loosened his grip on the pencil and rolled into a patient, forgiving wide of the crowd. Programs folded and unfolded like quiet accordions. The rink's lip threw a soft arc up the concrete. A thin rail separated ice and seating. White arrows marked the steps. He traced those arrows lightly with the pencil's blunt end against the pad, a small way to memorize their geometry. The camera steadied, then breathed when the operator shifted stance. He wrote wide holds and let the line end without reaching past what the picture offered. He skimmed the right edge where Gate C sat in partial profile. Blue tape bridged the push bar with 2 neat wraps. A tidy tail angled north toward the hinge. He wrote, Gate C taped, visible. He circled row H, noted a boy in a cap swinging his leg, an usher with pocketed hands, and a woman resting a program under her chin. Nothing misbehaved. He allowed the sentence to finish before adding anything more. Inside the first envelope, the stage door counter tag showed a pencil loop 1 digit higher than the usher report's final tally. He arranged them in a row, tag, report, pad, and wrote Gate C+1. The report's line was plain, Gate C taped, do not use during show. He boxed +1, underlined taped, and pressed the clicker once. Dry tick, again. Smooth. The sound parked beside the fan's quiet whir, equal and small, nothing dramatic. A grease pencil note on the leader read, Cam 2 sync, 1:30. He marked 90 sec in the margin, matched the viewer's counter, and settled into a slow roll. The optical track's room tone fit the bowl. Broad, honest, not hollow. He let his breathing find the same pace. Only then did he set the pencil back to paper, prepared to name ordinary things so any departure would stand up straight when it arrived. He checked the wall clock again, 12:12 a.m., and copied it under temperature. He logged spotlight sweeps, seat flips, and applause arriving in offset clusters. He penciled sound field dagger honest. The picture and the wash agreed. The operator's drift tightened. He wrote steadier platform with a small arrow. At Gate C, the tape held its line. The tail stayed north, satin catching a thin highlight like a thread pulled straight and humming faintly. He paused on a frame to study surfaces. paint matte, chrome softened by grain, tape satin. He sketched the tail as a small triangle pointing north and shaded the bar beneath. 2 tiny crosshairs near the latch would anchor later comparisons. The pad began to look like a quiet map of rectangles and arrows. He resumed, breathing with the projector, keeping his elbow off the table so minor tremors wouldn't pretend to be facts. He slid a finger down the usher report. Pre-show sweep at 7:42 p.m. Tape verified. Shift change at 8:55 p.m. He parked the reel near that offset, accounting for 1:30, and watched. A girl adjusted a mitten. An usher cleared a step with his knee to make space for a coat. The door's tape didn't flutter. He wrote 8:55, no motion. The line felt sturdy. He left a space below it for later noise. The fluorescent hum settled into the kind of sound that disappears unless invited back. He wrote baseline complete and drew a clean horizontal to divide the page. On the next line, he left 3 empty boxes: reflection, pressure, hands. If anything wobbled at gate C, it would be named and placed. He let the picture glide for a minute without notes, honoring the room, the film, and the hours that taught him patience. Intermission softened the bowl. Rows rose in pockets, coats unblooming from laps, the sound reassembling into footfalls and paper. Streams formed toward restrooms and concessions like currents choosing the easy bend. He followed them with the corner of his eye while keeping the frame wide. Gate C sat at an odd angle to the flow, taped and correct, its tidy tail angled north. He began a head count along row H, 3 passes, each returning 24, calm as breathing. He checked concession strips. Grease pencil math ran tall, then flattened. Machine B out, 9:12. He copied that time in the margin, slid near it, and watched faces for the tiny choreography of a stall, shoulders turning, hands redeciding. The frame didn't echo the outage, no drift toward the west walkway. He drew a short divider on the pad and wrote no visible effect. The fan in the viewer kept its small, even promise. When the operator returned from a cutaway, the picture settled into a patient wide. Applause rose in clusters, islands with their own weather. At the frame's right edge, along the door jamb, a slim vertical darkening eased downward and was gone before it could be certain. He scrubbed back. Nothing. Forward, there. He lifted the lamp a touch, careful with heat. The change lived in the emulsion, not the projection. He wrote jam density shift and left the conclusion blank. He opened the lighting cue sheet. The margin said, "Hold at 60%, house stays." No nearby cue allowed a deliberate dim. He boxed no cue and bracketed the timestamp. Watches in row H winked lazy reflections. Programs fanned like slow wings. None lined with the door. He drew an arrow to gate geometry, a second to operator stance, then drew both lighter than habit. The picture breathed once and steadied as if nothing had happened. He returned to the door. The tape's tail, drawn as a north-pointing triangle on his pad, no longer pointed north. It lay flatter, aligned with the rail, a quiet correction. He scrubbed back 2 seconds, north. Forward again, flat. He wrote tail deflect, and below it, no body present. He searched indulgently for the cheater's sleeve or opportunist's hand. The absence held. He sketched a second triangle beside the first and left it unshaded for contrast. He wrote pressure in a neat hand as if the word itself were a valve. Bowls exhale when crowds stand. Doors remember that. A maintenance memo in the envelope mentioned west doors adjusted. Bar springs stiff 3 days earlier. He copied stiff and drew a soft wave between crowd breath and tail deflect. The wave wasn't proof. It was permission to keep watching without forcing drama into the room. He let the wave sit quietly. He timed the deflection at the viewer's counter. Plus 278 frames from his last clean note. He converted roughly to seconds, drew a narrow window, and scanned row H for neighboring motion. A scarf sailed briefly. A program folded once, then twice. Neither shadowed the bar. He wrote adjacent motion insufficient and circled the phrase so it wouldn't drift. When sleepy hours tempt certainty, circles keep language from stepping ahead of evidence. He examined edge behavior. Satin tape should keep a consistent highlight. Paint should not. In the deflection frame, the edge highlight shifted left by a hair. He marked A where it had been, B where it was, and drew a short arrow between them. The dots were close enough to quarrel over, far enough to deserve their own line. He gave them one, then added specular drift in a quieter script beneath. He let the film run while not watching the door for 5 full breaths. The rink carried an easy number into its close. Applause began like first rain somewhere high and traveled the bowl. When he returned, the tail had nearly remembered its earlier angle, then changed its mind. He wrote microlift and resettle, then no break to honor the tape for doing its simple job. He underlined job once, gently. He traced a small rectangle around the latch on the pad, a portable overlay he could redraw if power dropped. He shaded it lightly and wrote grain honest within the box. The habit belonged to places where pictures lie for reasons that aren't moral, only mechanical. He thought about how many doors in this building breathed all night and never learned a name for breathing. He let the box cool and turned a page. He closed the section by copying the wall clock, 12:29 a.m., and the mercury strip still at 64 degrees dry. 3 empty boxes waited. Reflection, pressure, hands. Only pressure received diagonal stripes, not full, just enough to carry weight without pretending to be verdict. He wrote row H stable again so it would meet him kindly when he came back tired. He let the reel spin 3 seconds free, palmed the knob, and set the room still. He unfolded the seat map, H, edges softened by handling. A penciled X blocked a column for equipment. That matched the tripod shadow from the opener. He traced sight lines from the platform to gate C, marking rays that might make verticals slide. None explained the jam darkening or the tail's brief change. He wrote geometry insufficient in plain letters. The phrase wasn't defeat. It kept the table honest while the room stayed quiet and useful. He tested clock drift. The leader still held cam 2 sync 1:30. He slid to a clean musical accent, counted measures under breath, and tapped the pencil's eraser at each downbeat. The house cues met the music's spine without wobble. He boxed sync confidence and eased the lamp down a notch, sharing heat with the acetate like a courteous guest. The steady hum returned to invisibility, which is where a good hum belongs. He returned to row H for a slow 4-pass head count, writing 24, 24, 24, 24 in neat columns. On a 5th pass, he allowed hats and scarves to stand in for faces, a small indulgence that didn't change the sum. He wrote no substitution beside the line. The boy in the cap kept his gentle swing. An usher shifted weight without leaving his lane. He underlined persistence, soothing, not probative, but earned. He compared usher log handwriting, 2 hands in the same hour. The second pressed harder, carving carbon darker. He wrote second hand, firmer, then, resisting speculation, drew a short line toward +1 and stopped it early on purpose. The unfinished line signaled restraint to his later self. He copied the hour window again, gave it room on the page, and let the paper hold what his voice refused to hurry. He froze a doorway-wide frame and traced the tape tail again, adding a millimeter scale along his drawn bar. He labeled A where the tail first lived and B where the deflection flattened it. Between them, he wrote small weather. Words like weather let a night keep its gentleness. He refused harder language until a harder thing arrived. The still held. The pencil hovered. He shaded A lightly, left B unshaded, patient. He pulled the maintenance memo from the envelope's back. West doors adjusted 3 days prior. Bar springs stiff. He copied the date, circled stiff, and added settling plausible. The typewriter ribbon streaked faintly. He sketched that streak too, a useless detail that nonetheless situated the paper in this room's air. He wrote situated and underlined it once, a reminder that records live somewhere, not just anywhen, which matters when numbers resist. He rolled into a crowd rise. Heat changed the bowl, coats lifted, Applause moved like low wind through wheat. He watched Gate C sideways, refusing to pin it. The tail lifted a breath's worth, then settled, again obedient. He copied breath, not hand, from earlier, and gave it a second underline, then checked himself by writing working above it in smaller letters. Wait, not verdict. He let the underline cool there. He opened the incident sheet, carbon purple impression. Minor complaint, spilled drink, section H3, resolved. The time was mush that might read 9:58. He wrote approx a 9:59, where his counter suggested and placed a dot 2 rows down from the boy's cap. The dot meant only that he had looked. He wrote looked in the margin. Sometimes the verb itself deserved to be filed so it didn't masquerade later as proof. He examined grain near the latch rectangle. Before the deflection, silver halide stacked like soft snow. After, the highlight stripe lay fractionally flatter. He wrote specular drift, and beneath it, no occluder to honor the missing sleeve that stubborn minds invite. He noted his own desire for a hand to appear, and bracketed desire named so it wouldn't sneak into evidence. Naming the wish kept the room from manufacturing it. He tested lamp thresholds. Dialed lower, the satin highlight softened but refused to vanish. Dialed back, it held consistent across similar frames. He wrote edge robust and drew a second column where he kept sentences that would embarrass in daylight. In that column, he wrote, "We are still only in the room." He added a tiny closed door beneath the words, not whimsical, just a diagram of discipline. He closed the section by copying the wall clock, 12:41 a.m., and the mercury strip at 64 degrees. 3 boxes returned, reflection, pressure, hands, plus a 4th, record keeping. He shaded pressure darker than before, left reflection faint, hands empty, record keeping waiting for the permanent +1. The pad's corners had begun to curl. He smoothed them with his palm. The reel idled politely while the room decided nothing and preserved everything. He advanced until Q dots grazed the frame's corner, changeover marks like tiny moons. The operator rode past them. A splice followed with a soft pop in the optical track. Grain shifted half a grade, as if the air in the bowl had thickened. He logged reel join holds and compared door edges before and after. Gate C kept its line. The tape's tail favored flat a shade more often now, but never enough to call it a habit. He opened the projectionist's note tucked behind the can label, penciled times, a quick good crowd underlined once. No mention of doors. He copied the underline anyway, not because underlines prove anything, but because they remind a later reader a hand pressed the page. He wrote operator attentive and drew a line to steady camera. The tripod shadow matched earlier. The bowl's noise bed held. He added baseline preserved in a calmer hand. He checked a fire code plan for egress routes. Gate C was marked locked for show, with arrows pushing traffic to the next exit. He traced those arrows and overlaid them on the pad's sketch, aligning aisle arrows from the film. The overlay fit with quiet satisfaction. He wrote routing consistent and made a small, careful X where row H's aisle bends. The X had no drama in it. It just sat where it belonged. He unrolled a thin strip of tear-off ticket stubs rubber-banded in the envelope. Serial numbers climbed neatly, then hiccuped by one, ink skip or finger slip. He didn't force a rhyme with the +1 on the door tag. He simply wrote stub anomaly, print, and drew a fence between the notes so they wouldn't lean on each other. Records are social. Fences keep them polite. He let the band snap back gently around the strip. He revisited the audio as a witness of its own. The crowd bed brightened during intermission, then settled. A tenor whistle threaded twice across a number, consistent and indifferent to doors. He marked whistle persists and listened for the kind of hollowness that hints at a corridor opening. None appeared. He added no duct echo next to no light cue from earlier. Sound refused to invent what the picture withheld. He accepted the refusal. He inspected the tape itself more closely on screen. Satin edge, small feather where the adhesive met the bar. A faint manufacturer's watermark only visible when the highlight tilted. He drew the feather on the pad, then watched it through the deflection frame and after. The feather bent with the tail, then remembered itself. He wrote adhesive memory, and beneath it, material, not intent. The words calmed the part of him that courts plot. He copied the thermostat's 64-degree MIAFs again, and felt a petty wish for temperature drift to hand him a tidy paragraph. The mercury strip declined to help. He wrote air stable and opened the ventilation service log stapled to a cardboard backing. Filters changed the previous week, fans balanced. He underlined balanced, thought about pressure again, and shaded the pressure box 1 degree darker, still shy of certainty, safely clear of story. He slow-rolled the frame where the jam darkening had appeared, then walked surrounding frames with fingertip taps on the knob. On one pass, a woman's glossy purse caught light 3 seats off the aisle, a plausible agent for a quick vertical flicker. He marked purse vector with an arrow that stopped short of the jam. The distance stayed inconvenient. He added insufficient reach and let the page hold both ideas without merging them. He opened a union call sheet that rode with the usher logs. Names redacted, positions intact. 2 replacements slotted across the same half hour as the shift change. He wrote fresh eyes beside the time and wondered if fresh eyes make truer counts or merely different ones. He drew a bracket from fresh eyes to +1 and left it hovering above the line, a bridge that doesn't land yet. Bridges can wait if the water is calm. He refreshed his row H passes. 4 columns of 24 sat even. On the 5th, a hat bobbed into the aisle and back, briefly tempting arithmetic. He wrote temptation noted and kept the sum. He copied the wall clock, 12:53 a.m., and drew a vertical rule to mark the hour's slow work. The tape's tail, watched without staring, favored flat again, then tilted politely north at rest as if practicing both truths for later. He closed the section by returning to the pad's opening diagram. He re-inked the small rectangle around the latch and added millimeter ticks along the bar's drawn edge. He labeled the ticks 06 so his later self could say a number instead of a feeling. Under the drawing, he wrote 3 quiet lines. Door breath continues, record breath continues, answer withheld. He didn't press the pencil hard. The page didn't need pressure to remember. He inspected the print itself for mischief. Edge code dated the stock appropriately. Lab notches matched the leader's scribble. A faint printer scratch ran vertically for 12 frames near the finale, unrelated to any door. He logged scratch, irrelevant, and traced perfs with a fingertip to feel chatter that sometimes imitates motion. The perfs were calm, even where the splice lived. He wrote mechanical silence and let the phrase cool without pride or relief. He checked for print-through, ghosted density from tight winding, by stepping frames against a light card. The prior image left no whisper along the jam. The door's line remained its own. He noted no latent echo. A corner of the pad caught his sleeve. He straightened the stack and copied the wall clock. The fan's breath had become a room rule. He listened to it like he listened to crowds, not expecting, just holding. He lifted the can lid to read chalk once more, char patterns and pressure telling which hand had written Kant. On reel 2. Harder chalk, sharper grit. 2 hands, 2 habits. He wrote 2 hands persistent and drew short rails to projectionist note, usher log, call sheet, 3 separate places the night divided into pairs. He did not claim meaning. He drew the rails because rails keep pages from floating when hours grow thin. He opened a rink operations memo dated a week earlier. Door sweeps scheduled, latch springs replaced on west side, C included. The margin showed a check mark in a different pen. He copied dates, circled included, and added recent work. Tucker memory beside adhesive memory from earlier. Materials repeat themselves, so do notes. He shaded pressure 1 more degree and left hands empty again, not as denial, just as a place untouched. He sampled the optical track with a fingertip resting on the table, feeling micro variations through wood. Applause lifted evenly. No hollow-like corridor air. A sharp clap spiked, then fell back into cloth and concrete. He wrote no cavity signature and smiled at how serious the phrase looked for such modest news. He underlined modest, so his later self would hear the tone and not mistake patience for lack of effort. He inspected gate weave, a sway that can fake movement at verticals, by watching the jam against film grain rather than set. Grain held position while the jam behaved. He wrote weave negligible and penciled operator steady to honor the person behind the lens. He allowed one soft line to himself in the side column. Thank them, then crossed it gently, leaving the ghost so gratitude wouldn't dress as data by morning. He compared crowd phase before and after the tail's flattening. If pressure made the door breathe, pressure should show in hats, scarves, shoulders. He ran 3 passes counting rises. On each, applause traveled clockwise by the same unhurried arc. He wrote phase unchanged. He added door stare local weather, small climate against the larger bowl. The metaphor satisfied him, so he boxed it to keep it from pretending to be proof. He returned to the +1 on the counter tag. He read the usher line aloud, quietly. Gate C taped. Do not use during show. The sentence did not blink. He tested finger memory on the clicker. Press, tick, release, then tied its string loosely to match how it might have hung. He wrote human minute in the margin, a reminder that one press might travel differently through wrists at the end of a shift. He checked camera reports for operator breaks. A scribble suggested a brief handoff near the number where the jam darkened. He wrote lens hand changed and drew a dotted line back to 2 hands persistent on the pad. Dotted lines mean kindness, connection allowed, conclusion withheld. The darkening still failed to repeat. He wrote artifact singular and put a small dot beside it, not for drama, only for returning later without getting lost. He rewatched the applause that followed the deflection. The tail lifted a little, then remembered north, then didn't insist. He added settling continues with a patient underline. At the far edge of row H, the boy in the cap had stopped swinging his leg and folded a program into a long boat. He wrote boat in small letters. The word did nothing but place the hour. Placement sometimes holds better than answers. He closed the section by drawing a fresh square around 1-1 and leaving it empty again. Above it, he wrote 3 proposals on separate lines. Error, early or late, other gate mislogged. None earned shading. He copied the time, 1:07 a.m., and the room's 64-degree term that refused to care. He let the reel idle 6 seconds, then stilled it. The square looked patient rather than accusing. He let its patience set the room's pace. He opened a slim telephone log from the Coliseum office, penciled entries, switchboard initials. Calls in and out clustered pre-show, then thinned. Nothing flagged during the window that interested him. He wrote no line event and resisted wishing for a dead patch to pair with the door's breath. Wishes bias ink. He underlined bias named in the side column, a habit that kept the pad honest when the hour grew forgiving. A custodial checklist rode under a rusted clip. Aisles mopped, doors wiped, hinges oiled. West side included, initials JL. The oiling date landed 2 days before the show. He circled hinges oiled and copied JL in block letters as if the person could stand up inside them. The line didn't argue with anything. It simply filled the room with a practiced hand. He wrote routine persists and let the phrase do its small job. He unfolded a rink layout, skater paths marked in graceful loops with numbers that matched the program. Loops never edged Gate C. Choreography respected the taped bar. He traced the nearest figure 8 with the pencil's eraser, then watched the same number glide on film with pleasant sameness. He wrote art respects lock and felt the sentence tidy his desk a little. Tidiness helps when meaning declines an invitation. He leafed to usher uniforms requisitions, button counts, spare gloves, flashlight batteries. One note mentioned a dim torch replaced at 8:50. He ran the reel near that offset, eager for a reflected beam to climb the jam. The frame stayed stingy. Any torchlight drowned in the bowl's wash. He wrote no torch signature and drew a small battery symbol that looked like a child's drawing. He let the child live beside the word. He revisited Machine B out, 912 on the concession strip, and listened specifically for the far aisle change in human sound a cue makes when one line dies. Crowds built a second queue. The murmur thickened where it should, not where Gate C sat. He wrote noise drifts proper, and under it door remains local. Local weather keeps its scale. He refused to let a breeze pretend it had toppled a tree. He checked a security cage key sign-out card. One spare for west doors had left the cage 2 weeks earlier for maintenance and returned the next day, initialed by the same hand. He wrote key briefed and back. He drew the key as a rectangle with a hole, then crossed the rectangle lightly. No romance for the object. Tools want to star, records want to chorus. He kept both in their lanes. He examined camera reports again, slower cadence, looking for anything that implied a constraint near the door. Lens choice, stop, a filter note. Nothing pointed toward vignetting that might fake a jam darkening. He wrote optics neutral. He added operator brakes with times bracketed but refused to build a city on them. A bracket can hold a fact like a cup holds water. It cannot make a bridge on its own. He skimmed a maintenance punch list for the west corridor. Scuffed paint, squeak at bar, tape residue to remove post-event. The word residue charmed him. It suggested the future, the normal cleanup that follows rooms doing their jobs. He wrote residue expected and sketched a smear where tape might have left a ghost. Ghosts of adhesive are patient, loyal to surfaces, unimpressed with story. He underlined loyal and moved on quietly. He paused the reel on the audience near row H and let his peripheral vision hold Gate C, while his central gaze found faces. A woman smiled into a private joke. A boy refolded his paper boat into a flatter boat. He wrote boats persist, and then smaller, fidgets honest. The door's tail settled, lifted a breath, settled. He captured two-state rest and allowed himself the mathematician's comfort of naming behavior without sentencing it. He cross-checked first aid station notes. Bandage, aspirin, ice for a skater's ankle. Nothing near the west corridor. A neat hand wrote all quiet across the half hour that held his blink and tail. He copied all quiet verbatim to hold its tone. Quiets can be theatrical or earned. This one felt earned. He boxed the words lightly so the box didn't feel like a cage. Boxes should keep company, not keep prisoners. He closed the section by returning to the pad's 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping. He shaded pressure to a near-solid and left reflection, pale. Hands stayed empty. Under record-keeping, he wrote +1 persists and drew a thin horizon beneath it. He copied the time, 1:19 a.m., and the room's reliable 64 dig. He let the reel idle 4 seconds and stopped it with his palm, respectful, as if ending a sentence out loud. He opened a slim accession sheet listing who touched the reels since deposit. 3 signatures repeated over months, then a 4th only once on a rainy Tuesday. He copied the dates, drew a ladder of initials, and marked the outlier with a small dot, not a horn. He wrote chain stable and beneath it, 1 odd hand. The dot didn't accuse. It simply sat on the page like a pin in cloth, holding position without stabbing. A shipping slip from the lab, road folded into a glassine sleeve. 2 prints struck, 1 sent to television, 1 retained. He wrote twin exists and circled it. Twins make good mirrors. He drew an empty box for TV copy and left it open. The twin wasn't here to answer. He added ask archive partner in the margin, future work that would either restate quiet or complicate it. Both futures felt usable. He stepped through the reel counting edge numbers, printer's cues marching in confident sequence. No skips, no reverse digits. He traced the order with his pencil like walking beadboard with a fingertip, not to prove anything, but to let his hand know the room's rhythm. At the doorframe, the numbers kept tempo. He wrote count holds, and under it error not numeric. Numbers decline to bend. People do. He copied the time without ceremony. He flipped a clipping from a local paper, holiday show praised, crowd described as spirited, a caption misnamed a skate jump. He underlined the mistake gently and wrote "press fallible." Fallible isn't malicious, it's human gravity. He refused to staple the word to +1, though temptation tried. He drew a fence again so notes wouldn't lean, then let the clipping return to its envelope with the soft sound of paper obeying. He ran the reel backward for a minute. Sometimes backward makes forward honest. The tail's behavior inverted cleanly. Flat became lift at the same beats, settling in mirror. He wrote reversible symmetry and felt the phrase "cool the page." Symmetry comforts because it declines to conspire. He boxed pressure darker, left hands empty, and resisted the urge to shade reflection just to keep it company. Boxes deserve their own weather. He examined perforation wear near the suspect moments. If handling stress had stretched holes unevenly, weave could masquerade as motion. Holes lived square and patient. He wrote "perf health good" and added "gate alignment trustworthy." Trustworthy isn't proof, it's scaffolding that doesn't wobble when you lean. He leaned slightly, enough to admit he was here and not a machine, then straightened and copied the wall clock. The hour advanced without offering opinion. He checked leader notes for earlier operators' private language: circles, arrows, hold, sweeten. Nothing perched near the door sequence except "nice bowl bed." He wrote no inherited suspicion. Suspicion often travels by shorthand. Tonight it lacked a passport. He allowed himself a small private comfort at that. He wrote comfort named in the side column so it wouldn't creep into evidence. Naming comforts keeps them from pretending to be rulers.
He pulled a contact print strip, a short ladder of frames on paper, from a lab envelope. Static images, blunt drama. At the door sequence, the tail showed both positions across successive squares, exactly as film had reported. He wrote "paper agrees" and let the redundancy settle the room. Agreement across media doesn't enlarge a story. It narrows it gently. He underlined gently so he would remember to keep the voice small.
He skimmed a house memo on emergency lighting. Test weekly. Results normal the Monday before Halloween. He copied normal and wrote "no emergency spill." If the jam darkening had wanted to be a corridor light, it would have worn different clothes. It didn't. He drew an unlit bulb beside the line, then crossed it softly. Even drawings can get ideas. He returned his eyes to row H and let them rest there. He requested his own patience by writing the word "interval" and leaving a blank line under it. He sat through 30 quiet seconds with the reel stopped, listening to the fan and the fluorescent ballast. He wrote no new thought and smiled at the sentence's fairness. Not every pause returns a coin. He resumed and watched applause move clockwise again. The door's tail practiced its two homes, choosing neither as if politeness were physics. He closed the section by listing the days unanswered: +1 tag, single shot jam density, tail deflect without a hand, twin print unseen. He drew a column of squares and left them open, then added one filled square labeled air. Some nights end with air, moving, measured, sufficient. He copied 1:34 a.m., 64 degrees, and drew a small horizon under the numbers. Horizons are not decisions. They are lines you respect until morning. He unrolled a brittle architect's floor plan, onion skin taped at the corners. West corridor widths, door swings, and sightlines from the bowl were drawn in tidy pencil with inked corrections. Gate C carried a stamp, panic bar, hold shut during performance. He traced the swing arc and measured how far the push bar stood from the interior jam. The geometry matched what the film implied. He wrote "plan agrees" and let the paper rest as if tired. He compared plan arrows with his sketch, aligning aisle angles and rail offsets. The overlay behaved like two transparencies meant for each other. He wrote "corridor angle shallow," a reminder that any light spill from the interior would graze the jam rather than cut it. Grazing explains softness. Cutting explains certainty. He underlined graze to keep his expectations small. The reel, idle for the comparison, waited without complaint, a courtesy he noticed. He checked a PA test log, weekly shout of numbers into empty seating. Monday's entry read clear, initials confident, no complaint from West speakers. He wrote no loudness bias. A skewed speaker can tilt how crowds breathe. He returned to the audio and hunted for an undulation tied to the corridor. None answered. He added no pulsed echo. The bowl sounded whole, as if doorways chose to be walls whenever songs needed them. He found a chalk tally on stiff cardstock, Usher's handheld count by section. Row H climbed, 24, 24, 24, 24, with one erased mark between the second and third lines. He held the card to the lamp to read the ghost of the erasure. It still resolved as 24. He wrote erasure reconciled and refused to make it shake hands with +1. Reconciled things deserve their quiet. Mysteries can wait their turn. He pulled a janitor's route map, pencil arrows and room notes, mop closet west, rags, fans. A circle by gate C read tape after doors. He copied after, appreciating the unhurried confidence of routine. Tape would be replaced if it lifted. That promise echoed his adhesive memory note. He wrote maintenance reaffirms and shaded pressure a whisper darker, not to crown it, only to keep pace with the practical world's posture. He returned to film at the deflection moment and framed the tail precisely. The satin edge still showed AB drift across a breath and back again. He sketched A and B anew, then added C for the almost return that stopped short. He labeled C, courtesy in small script, because the tail seemed to remember where it belonged without insisting. Courtesy is an attitude in materials, too. He let the word live. He checked custodial notes for rags or polish that might gloss the bar. No polish listed, only soap and water, oiled hinges, wipe dry. He wrote no gloss treatment and returned to the highlight stripe. It remained modest. Gloss would have thrown a blade. He saw only a thread. He underlined thread to keep metaphors from swelling into claims. Threads help. Blades conclude. He was not ready to swing anything. He stepped the reel backward 12 frames before the jam darkening, then forward 30 after, tapping the knob with 2 fingers. On one pass, a spectator's cuff button winked a line 3 seats in, vertical enough to tease, but too far to touch the jam. He wrote button candidate, short, and drew the same short arrow he'd used for the purse. The page began to collect almosts. He boxed almosts so they wouldn't organize themselves. He sampled ambient drift with the bare underside of his wrist held near the projector's exhaust, then away. Small ritual to reset attention. He wrote attention reset and returned to row H. The boy's paper boat had become a narrower boat. A woman smoothed her coat, slow as weather. The tail lifted, settled, lifted. He added 2 state rest persists and felt how naming behavior can slow a room to its proper speed. He checked fire door inspections, punches along a metal tag from months past, last punch 2 weeks before the show. Gate C passed. He wrote hardware sound. A margin note asked for new blue painter's tape monthly. Older tape leaves residue. He smiled at the bureaucracy of tape and added fresh tape likely. Fresh tape wants to behave. He shaded reflection the faintest shade. Acknowledgement, not welcome. He closed the section by copying 1:47 a.m. and 64 Degrauv and redrawing the 4 boxes. Reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping. Pressure nearly filled. Reflection stayed a mist. Hands remained white. Under record keeping, he wrote +1 stubborn and added twin print. Ask with a small arrow toward tomorrow. He let the reel spin 3 seconds, palmed it still, and left the floor plan folded open on the table like a held breath. He wrote request twin print on a fresh slip and clipped it to the envelope. Morning work. Nights accept questions. Mornings fetch copies. He returned to the table and drew the door at quarter scale, adding arrows for air moving from bowl to corridor during rises. He shaded the corridor lightly to remind himself it owned cooler air. He wrote cool seeks warm, a child's sentence that nevertheless predicts direction. Predicting isn't proving. He left the word polite. He set a paper flag test. A narrow strip taped to a ruler. held near the projector's exhaust, then drawn away, calibrating his eye to micro-lifts. The strip obeyed tiny shifts cleanly, then fell back without drama. He wrote eye-tuned and reminded himself not to hunt the door. He would keep the door in the kindness of his side vision. Central gaze invents when it's bored. Side vision keeps its manners and reports weather. He checked ventilation cycles, a typed chart on cardstock. Fans stepped through low and medium, according to occupancy, no high setting scheduled. A pencil note from the previous month read, "Low, quiet complaints," with a smiley too careful to be careless. He wrote no cycle spike and copied quiet complaints because tone often carries truth across paperwork better than numbers do. He allowed himself one soft smile and boxed it so it wouldn't leak. He weighed a late exit scenario. Someone slips to another gate while gate C stays taped. He mapped routes that begin and end away from camera, penciling little footprints between lettering. Row H remained honest at 24 during checks. He wrote no disappearing chair. Then, counting posture, how a tired usher might click while thinking of a different door. He added misplaced click plausible and did not shade it. Plausible isn't lived. He opened the counter tag again and, with the clicker in hand, rehearsed a shift's end. Last sweep, eyes soft. One more tug at the strap. One friendly word at the stage door. A click to punctuate the word rather than a person. He wrote speech click and let the odd phrase stand. Counters record fingers, not intention. Sometimes they memorialize punctuation. He circled human minute twice, not as excuse, as scale. He checked viewer alignment with a registration leader. Crosshairs, wedges, azimuth bars. The gate locked square. Lateral weave remained minimal. He wrote transport true and under optics neutral drew a small chain, each link lightly shaded. The chain meant systems in agreement. Film, machine, room. Agreement narrows mischief's exits. He felt the comfort open a door to laziness and shut it again by writing comfort named. Named comforts work like locks. He turned to audio once more and listened for the room's body, low-frequency bloom that swells when doors breathe. The spectrum stayed even. Applause wore no hollow. He wrote LF stable. A hand clap echoed twice off concrete, the same way it had echoed earlier. He underlined same. He added no corridor vowel, his private slang for a certain tall echo. The phrase looked odd and right. He let it settle unchallenged. He compared two intermission frames, one with tail north, one flattened, by tracing both onto onion skin over the pad's bar drawing. He pinned the sheets together at the hinge and rocked them. The change measured within 1 millimeter on his drawn scale. He wrote D ma 1 millimeter and beneath it behavior. Chan pressure grade. Then, to keep himself honest, hand remains absent. Absence isn't proof. It is a room kept for a guest who doesn't arrive. He reread the jam darkening entry and added a modest suspect. Operator breathing. A tiny sway during applause settling. He studied the platform shadow. It did not thicken. He wrote sway insufficient. He tried the purse again, the cuff button again, and accepted their nearness without granting them reach. He boxed adjacent glints and placed the box away from the door, drawing like you set noisy children at a back table. He copied the mercury strip, still 64 degrees less, and muttered thanks to a number that refused to perform. He drew a timeline for the night down the pad's margin. Usher's sweep, machine outage, shift change, applause arcs, tail deflect, jam darkening. Dots sat where they should, not clustering like gossip. He wrote no conspiracy of timing. Sometimes the absence of a pattern is the shape of the truth. He left the thought unembellished. He closed the section by pulling the 4 boxes close: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and writing a single sentence across their bottoms. Counter remembers one more than paper. He shaded pressure nearly full, left reflection pale, hands white, record-keeping open with +1 inside an empty square. He copied 1:59 a.m. and let the reel freewheel 5 seconds before stopping it. like loosening a jar so morning hands wouldn't struggle. He wrote fatigue check on the pad's margin and read backward 2 pages, line by line, as if arriving to someone else's notes. The sentences held their temperature, verbs stayed small. He copied consistency adequate and set a timer on his watch for 10 quiet minutes, a guard against speed. While it ticked, the reel idled. He sharpened the pencil, emptied the shavings into his palm, and tapped them into the trash like a metronome calming itself. He tested annotation redundancy, rewriting the latch diagram from memory on a blank sheet, then overlaying it against the original. Millimeter ticks matched. A, B, and C landed where the earlier drawing promised. He wrote memory agrees and let a little air out of his shoulders. Memory can swell when hours stretch. This one kept its modest cut. He dated the duplicate, stamped a tiny dot in the corner, and filed it behind the first. He ran a slow control pass with his eyes purposely ignoring gate C, naming objects left to right, like reading a child's book. Scarf, glove, rail, arrow, cup, chin, cap, knee. When he reached the door, he named bar and tape without hunting. The tail behaved, flat, then slightly north at rest, as if grateful not to be stared at. He wrote control steady and under it no hunt artifacts. Politeness, even in looking, pays dividends. He checked screening distance by taking 2 steps back from the viewer, letting the picture shrink to a postcard. Small frames exaggerate change. The jam darkening no longer read. The tail's deflection barely suggested itself. He wrote salience reduces with distance and then close work required. He moved back in, feeling the odd relief of returning to labor. Some truths only occur to people willing to stand too close and keep their hands light. He reviewed pause discipline, how long he let a frame sit before writing. He counted 1-5 in his head at each stop, long enough to quiet eagerness, short enough to retain the image. He wrote 1-5 works. He added no coffees later in the side column as a note to the future version of himself, who sometimes bargains with speed. The room offered its gentle hum like a pact. He accepted and underlined pact. He returned to row H and let the applause arc teach him time again. The wave began near the northwest and traveled clockwise in the same lazy path as earlier checks. He wrote phase constant and beneath it clock honest. Honesty in clocks is the kind of comfort that doesn't ask to be thanked. He thanked it anyway, under breath, so gratitude wouldn't show up on the pad and confuse itself with fact. He reopened the counter tag and practiced 3 tiny click rituals, counting chairs, counting lines in a sentence, and clicking to punctuate a spoken greeting. Each ritual produced 1 surplus when his mouth moved. He wrote speech click replicable and boxed it, not as verdict, as sympathy for wrists that translate language into numbers. Sympathy isn't science, but it keeps pencils from becoming hammers. He underlined not verdict to hold the border. He checked viewer heat with the back of his hand near the gate, then read the mercury strip, still 64 degrees. He wrote thermal drift absent and sketched a tiny thermometer in the margin, a childish habit he allowed because it steadied breath. He reset the lamp a hair lower and ran 30 seconds. Highlights held, midtones remained calm. He added lamp cut safe and felt the film's grateful quiet answer him by not complaining. He compared 2 latch rectangles drawn earlier by laying onion skin over both and pinning the hinge with a paperclip. Rocked together, the rectangles agreed like twins who finish each other's sentence ends, not beginnings. He wrote geometry repeatable. Repeatable isn't beautiful, it's sturdy. He favored sturdy because beauties fail loudly and confuse rooms. He put the paperclip back in the small tin where he keeps humility beside tools that pretend to be clever. He ran a minute-long no-note pass, hands folded, eyes loosely tracking the frame's center. When the minute ended, he wrote only 5 words. Nothing new. Patience still required. He drew a small horizon under the sentence so it wouldn't float. Some lines deserve land. He copied the wall clock, 2:12 a.m., and the sound of the fan with a single wavy line. The line looked exactly like what it was. ongoing and deserved. He closed the section by revisiting the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and writing a thin summary beneath each: thread, not blade, near full, empty, +1 unmoved. He added request twin print, mourning with a small arrow that touched record-keeping only. Arrows mustn't trespass. He let the reel freewheel 4 seconds, pressed his palm to stop, and squared the pad to the table's scorch mark, as if aligning to a modest north. He reopened the lighting cues to test kindness against fact. If kindness wanted a dim to explain the jam, the sheet declined to help. Hold at 60%, house stays. He copied the line slowly so the refusal would register in his hand. He drew a thin bar across the pad beneath no cue, not a fence, more a shelf to rest the idea on. Ideas stored neatly don't wander into other rooms and borrow coats. He replayed the jam, darkening at quarter speed with the lamp trimmed. Grain walked like ash flurries. The vertical change appeared and dissolved without leaving a footprint in the frame before or after. He wrote no halo, a note he reserves for effects that carry no penumbra. Penumbra means intent or mass. The line here had neither. He underlined neither and let the underline cool, keeping drama out of the pencil's mouth. He lifted the usher report again and read it aloud softly. Gate C taped. Do not use during show. The sentence still didn't blink. He whispered the words with the measured tone of a person copying inventory, and the tone fit the paper perfectly. He wrote inventory voice and, below it, count posture, the way a click can mark completion rather than a person. He circled posture so the human shape wouldn't vanish under numbers. He sketched alternate routes from row H to neighboring gates that remain off camera, marking knees, rails, and the pace a body would need to keep time with applause. Each route crossed sightlines that the camera samples in other moments. He wrote routes sampled and, underneath, no gaps discovered. Gaps harm patience. The night preserved patience. He allowed himself to feel the relief, and wrote relief named so it wouldn't sneak into evidence later. He tested specular sources again, building a tiny museum of suspects: purse gloss, cuff button, varnished program cover, a shiny shoe toe. He placed each candidate against distance and angle on the pad like tokens on a board. The purse and button remained charming nearly fits. Varnish and shoe lost quickly to geometry. He wrote glints domesticated and boxed them off stage. Domestic glints behave. Conspiracies need wilder furniture than he could locate. He listened once more for a corridor vowel, the tall echo his ear trusts. Applause kept its rounded consonant character. Voices stacked, but did not tunnel. He wrote no vowel shape and drew a small vertical rectangle shaded lightly to depict the kind of echo he didn't hear. Diagrams of absence help future readers forgive restraint. He added quiet holds beside it, because quiet was doing some of the night's best work. He rechecked gate weave by fixing his eye to grain rather than architecture, counting subtle sway against perfs. The jam stayed disciplined. The weave remained too small to impersonate motion. He wrote architecture studies and transport true on the same line, linking them with a tiny chain he copied from earlier. Chains are declarations of agreement, not victory laps. He kept the tone modest, which kept the room modest in return. He measured the tail triangle again on onion skin, this time adding a dotted outline for where it would be if a hand had pulled. The dotted outline swung farther, past his B position, into an angle the film never grants. He wrote hand would exceed. Excess is loud. The frame stayed quiet. He shaded pressure nearly full in its box and left hands clean white, as if saving a seat for someone late who never arrives. He resorted paperwork piles into 3 stacks: mechanical, human, atmospheric. +1 sat on the human stack like a small coin placed politely on a counter. Coins don't explain themselves. Clerks do. He wrote clerical minute and speech click beneath it, then refused to shade them. He copied 2:23 a.m. and the stubborn 64 digraph that had attended him for hours without comment. Numbers that don't perform deserve thanks. He kept the thanks off paper. He allowed a no-note pass across the door sequence with the reel at normal speed, hands in his lap, shoulders low. The tail lifted, settled, lifted. The jam stayed itself. He wrote behavior repeats without invitation. Repetition matters because it declines the theater of coincidence. He drew a small horizon under the line, land enough for a tent peg, and let the silence following the sentence count as part of the sentence's grammar. He closed the section by redrawing the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and adding a 5th, smaller, quiet. He shaded pressure almost completely, reflection faint, hands empty, record-keeping open with +1 inside, quiet solid black. Quiet is a measurement too. It measures how little a room needs to say to be understood. He aligned the pad to the table's scorch mark and touched the reel to stillness as if taming a clock. He stood, stretched once, and let the reel idle with the lamp trimmed. Standing changes what patience feels like. The archive's hum met the hallway's softer air. Somewhere a pipe ticked as if counting with him. He wrote interval taken and a small note to drink water. Practicalities keep nights from turning theatrical. He returned to the stool, squared the pad to the scorch mark, and set the film walking at a considerate pace. He copied 2:31 a.m. and rehearsed the night aloud in 12 plain sentences, one for each claim that had survived scrutiny. Speaking soft made imprecision obvious. His tongue tripped only where it should, at +1, at single-shot darkening. He wrote spoken past done. He underlined done lightly so pride wouldn't borrow the pencil. He turned the knob a quarter, letting applause arrive like weather. First drops, then a moving curtain, then the ordinary after. He checked the optical track leader for lab tone and azimuth bars, listening to whether the machine found center easily. It did. The tone sat where tone belongs. He wrote azimuth true and added no scrape for completeness. Completeness calms. He rolled back to the door sequence and held the lamp just shy of bright. The jam remained itself. The tape kept its manners. He copied behavior holds under added light without leaning on the words. He pulled a thin carbon copy labeled Usher Notes, overflow that hadn't mattered earlier. Aisle reminders, spare programs, a child seated on a parent's lap halfway through. He wrote lap seat only so the child would exist somewhere outside of applause. Then he returned to the door and added nothing. Not adding is work. He drew a small circle in the margin to symbolize an hour that learned not to decorate. He tested a soft focus watch, eyes slightly defocused to surrender detail and detect only motion. With details gone, the tail's lift settle registered as 2 gentle tilts, both small enough to belong to air, not wrists. He wrote blur test, ease air. He understood how pretty that sentence sounded, and put brackets around it until morning could scold or approve. Brackets keep pretty sentences from inviting their friends to stay the night. He reviewed projection speeds. Leader scribble 24, no notes about fast reels. He checked sprocket noise for excited chatter that follows speed change. The chatter stayed polite. He wrote speed constant and made a half-sized latch rectangle beside the first, copying A, B, C marks once more. Repetition isn't ceremony. It's a way to keep your hands from telling stories your eyes didn't see. The rectangles agreed like handwriting practiced slowly. He sifted the maintenance folder a final time and found a stubby note stapled sideways. Replace blue tape stock next order. He wrote fresh rolls incoming and drew a tiny serrated edge to remind himself, tape is a thing with teeth. Teeth prefer new surfaces. Old paint returns the favor by letting go. He added materials meet halfway. A gentle law. Gentle laws explain more nights than grand ones. He slid the film to the applause after the tail's flattening and listened for any vowel the bowl might grow when doors leak. No vowel. He wrote no corridor vowel, again and underlined again, not as boredom, as gratitude. Repetition is a pillow for true things. He shaded pressure almost full, then wiped the graphite smear from his pinky onto the pad's bottom edge, a little gray shoreline that recorded how work touches paper. He compared two stills on contact print, pre-deflection and near return, under a loop borrowed from another department. The loop's glass made grain a field of snow. The tail's tilt measured within the millimeter he had charted. He wrote paper confirms millimeter and put the loop back in its case with both hands, the way he returns a helpful sentence to a book. The case clicked politely, a sound that felt like filing truth. He drew 3 small timelines stacked: film, paper, people. On film, he marked blink, deflect, restore. On paper, he marked +1 and no cue. On people, he marked shift change, whistle, lap seat. The stacks didn't braid. They kept their lanes like good traffic. He wrote lanes hold, and below it, no braid offered. Some nights are highways with light rain and no incident. You still drive them carefully to the end. He closed the section by reboxing reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding twin print, mourning in the margin with a small arrow toward the envelope. Pressure neared black, reflection stayed mist, hands white, record keeping open with +1 sitting there like a coin no one pockets. He copied 2:44 a.m., 64 degree, and let the reel coast 3 seconds free before stilling it, keeping the room's patience intact for whatever followed. He sketched the panic bar assembly from the floor plan: hinge, spring, keeper, return. Beside it, he drew a tiny bellows to stand in for bowl pressure. He wrote force, deflect, restore, and added tape tail follows. The sequence felt like a grammar more than a theory. Subject, verb, object. Good for nights when facts prefer modest sentences. He shaded pressure nearly full again, then paused his pencil so the page could breathe without persuasion. He converted the door sequence to time math, frames to seconds, seconds to measures, measures to applause phrases, stacking the counts in columns. D-1 Emily landed between 2 easy claps, never during the skaters' turns. He wrote audience-driven, not performance-driven, then cross-driven and replaced it with timed near. Verbs can bully. Near is honest when rooms refuse commands. He boxed the new phrasing, small enough to show that it fit, not ruled. He copied 3 counting styles he had learned from ushers: click per person, click per pair, click on completion. He tried them with his finger on the desk: tap, 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 tap at the end of a row. Only the last produced a surplus when his mouth said, all set. He wrote completion click matchaker +1 risk and left the words undecorated. Risk is a plain noun. It doesn't want italics. The fan accepted the modesty. He checked a house manager memo. Please verify west doors taped. Log any exceptions. The signature looped kindly. The date matched. He wrote management posture. Careful, and drew a small umbrella over the line, his private icon for adults in the room. Care can't stop error, but it lowers its walk. He placed the memo atop the human stack where +1 sat, coin bright. Coins don't blush, paper can. He opened the insurance writer, capacity, egress ratios, aisle clearances, and traced the numbers with a fingertip. Nothing exotic, just math that keeps heads counted and doors honest. He wrote compliance ordinary, and under it no incentives to cheat. Incentives breed mischief. The ledger here smelled of soap and pencil, not corner cutting. He refused to let relief pretend to be proof. He wrote relief named in light script so the page wouldn't forget manners. He rechecked clock sources: wall clock, wristwatch, optical track tempo. They still agreed like a family that chooses not to argue at night. He wrote time conquered and drew a tiny triangle connecting film room hand. Triangles are stubborn. They hold shape. He placed the triangle beside jam darkening and felt the lack of a fourth point, light, that would have justified a dim. The triangle stayed 3. He left it politely incomplete. He read the usher overflow carbon again and noticed a faint indent beneath row H where a pencil had once pressed through, an erased 23 that resolved to 24. He wrote almost miscorrected and refused to celebrate. Corrections happen because humans bend toward tidy. He placed a light check beside record keeping and did not shade it, wary of mistaking diligence for verdict. The tale lifted and settled while he wrote, quietly doing its own work. He compared paper stocks, usher sheets brittle, tag card fibrous, memo smoother. Texture keeps archives from pretending everything came from the same mouth. He wrote many mouths and, on a whim he permitted, touched each sheet with the back of one knuckle, letting skin remember grain. He added voices stay plural. Plurality resists thrill. He returned his knuckle to the table, as if returning a borrowed object, and let the reel turn once. He contemplated camera height. A low platform would exaggerate verticals. A high one flattens them. The tripod shadow said high, confirmed by seatbacks in the near row. He wrote perspective reduces door drama. Reductions save nights from headlines. He allowed himself a breath that felt like standing at a window before curtains open. Morning would fetch the twin print. Tonight would keep its scale. He copied 2:58 a.m. without comment. He tested note order by rewriting the door's story in 5 sentences for a stranger. Tape secure. Tail shifts about a millimeter. No hand. Single shot darkening. Counter shows +1 against report. He read the 5 back and felt their temperature stay low. He wrote 5 hold. Holding is different from persuading. He underlined hold to remind himself persuasion isn't the job. Naming without heat is the job. The pencil agreed by staying dull. He closed the section by redrawing the boxes, reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding a thin bracket labeled scale that wrapped all 4. Scale matters. Small things deserve small words until morning proves otherwise. Pressure remained almost black. Reflection missed, hands empty. Record keeping open with +1 nested like a coin in felt. He aligned pad to scorch mark and stilled the reel, the room holding its breath the way paper sleeps. He drafted a request note for the twin print. Catalog number, reel IDs, a polite line about comparison frames around west door. He clipped it to the envelope with a red paper clip so morning hands would not miss it. He wrote, "Ask made physical." Asking is part of evidence. Paper that travels gathers truth. He copied 3:07 a.m. and let the reel idle while he cleared a corner of the desk for small experiments. He built a tabletop door from a manila folder and a ruler. Folder the door, ruler the bar, a sliver of painter's tape for the tail. He breathed across the hinge and watched the sliver lift, settle, lift. The tape remembered its first angle only when he stopped. He wrote model behaves and drew ABC above the sketch. Models aren't proof. They are rehearsals. He boxed rehearsal to keep confidence from wearing a badge. He compared tape ages from a supply drawer. New roll crisp, older piece with tired tack. The new sliver kept a clean edge highlight. The old feathered and clung differently after a breath. He wrote fresh tape. Thread, old, blur. On film, the highlights stayed thread-like even during deflection. He underlined thread again and shaded reflection a hair darker. Acknowledgement, not promotion. He set the old strip aside like a retired witness. He reviewed the vent map once more, following arrows from bowl to corridor and back. The west fans weren't scheduled for high. He wrote no gust source and added a tiny hourglass beside pressure. Air is slow law, not drama. He imagined applause as a soft piston, pushing once, relaxing twice. He wrote applause, piston, and smiled at the metaphor, trying to be helpful without pretending to be a lever. He rechecked seat counts with a fresh head, running row H forward and backward, reading lips for numbers he didn't need. 2, 3, 4, 5. The rhythm calmed him. 24 held each pass. He wrote H loyal. Loyalty in numbers is a small mercy. It lets attention spend elsewhere. He returned to gate C at the familiar beat. The tail chose flat, then north, then thought about both. He wrote choice rehearsed. He opened a building engineer's memo about pressure balancing during events. Simple language, careful tone. Doors prefer closer. People prefer open. Keep fans honest. He copied "Keep fans honest." It read like fatherly advice. He shaded pressure close to full and added "fans honest" beneath it, a pairing that felt like two hands at a steering wheel. Advice in plain talk often outlives diagrams. He let the plainness sit unedited. He checked sprocket tension on the viewer. Spring smooth, take-up even. A too tight take-up can tug frames and counterfeit motion. It didn't. He wrote "transport gentle" and penciled a miniature gear beside optics neutral. Gears belong to machines that keep promises. He listened to the promise in the fan's noise, then wrote promise kept in small letters that would be embarrassing by day and perfect at 3 a.m. He returned to the jam darkening and traced a thin mask on onion skin to isolate only that strip, letting the rest of the frame go pale. Viewed as a column alone, the darkening looked like weather passing behind glass. He wrote column, soccer, cloud, and then struck cloud lightly, replacing it with density transient. Poetry can visit, but it cannot stay. He boxed transient and placed it under reflection, still pale. He assembled a "what would a hand do" overlay, dotted arcs beyond B, a sharper pivot at the tail, and occluder's soft shoulder intruding. None appeared in film. He wrote "hand exceeds frames." Excess is how bodies confess. The frames stayed within manners. He left hands white and drew a small empty chair beside the box, a seat reserved for a guest who may simply be late forever. He copied 3:21 a.m. without comment. He sorted notes by scent, paper, acetate, chalk, so morning could find categories by nose as well as eye. He wrote "room remembered" and drew a key. Circle for mechanical, square for human, triangle for air. He stamped the counter tagline with a square. +1 belongs to people. He did not shade the square. People are capable of glory and arithmetic mistakes. Boxes are capable of waiting until noon. He closed the section by rewriting the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding model as a faint outline behind them. He shaded pressure almost solid, reflection lightly, hands untouched, record keeping open with +1 sitting like a coin against felt. Underneath, he wrote a single sentence: materials keep small promises, paper keeps time. He squared the pad to the scorch mark and let the reel coast 3 seconds free before his palm set it quiet. He wheeled the viewer 3 degrees left, then 3 right, simulating operator stance shifts. Off angles sometimes wake false motion at verticals. The jam stayed disciplined. The tape's highlight migrated politely without jumping. He wrote "parallax tames, doesn't conjure." The tail practiced its 2 positions with the same small manners. He added "range contained" and drew a bracket spanning AC on the pad's bar sketch. The bracket felt like a railing. Useful, unexciting, correct. He read a weather summary clipped from the week. Outside air cool, steady. No dramatic fronts. He underlined steady. Steady outdoors supports modest pressure indoors. Bowls breathe with bodies, not sky. He wrote external calm and drew a thin line between weather and pressure boxes, careful not to shade new certainty into the page. Lines may connect, shading decides. He kept decisions scarce. The reel returned to the door and found it unchanged. He revisited audio floor with headphones, low gain, hunting for rumble ladders that mark fan steps. The Spectrum's bottom wore the same patient wool as earlier. He wrote "no low ladder" and beneath it, "fans faithful," borrowing the engineer's word "honest" without repeating it. Repeated words grow confident too quickly. He added "LF." Furniture. It should feel like furniture. Present, unremarkable, missed only when absent. The bowl's furniture stayed where it belonged. He tried an eye fatigue test. Blink cadence set to 5 seconds. Jot only what persists between blinks. Persistences: arrow paint, bar seam, tails 2 homes, nothing else at the jam. He wrote "blink stable, tasse real," and boxed the phrase "small." Small boxes are promises to future readers. This won't swell by rehearsal. He thanked the exercise for being dull and wrote dull helps in the side column where kindness is allowed. He checked print density with a wedge card held to the viewer, gauging whether exposure fluctuations could mimic a column darkening. The wedge traced smooth. No step matched the jam's quick change. He wrote exposure even and added no lab pulse. Labs introduce pulses without caring about doors. This one had not. He returned to the purse and cuff candidates out of fairness, then crossed them softly. Pretty, not proximate. He opened a thin usher reprimand memo from months prior. Someone late to post, gently corrected. He wrote House expects order, then placed the memo beneath today's careful logs so the stack read, stumble, then steadiness. Steadiness changes how +1 feels. It becomes a mannerism, not a scheme. He wrote +1 for mannerism plausible and refused shading. Plausible is a coat you hold, not wear, until the weather demands it. He revisited row H yet again with a counting game. Left-hand taps even seats, right-hand taps odd. Both hands landed 24. He wrote two-hand check Schaller same and drew tiny left-right arrows like shoes at a doorway. The boy's paper boat had become a flat ribbon now, smoothed across his knee. He wrote boat retirees and felt the hour tuck in around the note. Human fidgets time-stamp nights better than clocks sometimes. He tested lamp shutter positions, sliver closed, then a hair more open, to ensure no mechanical vignetting stroked the jam. The column's behavior ignored his meddling. He wrote no shutter artifact and let the sentence sit without italics. Italics turn notes into speeches. He added column behaves under metal as an afterthought, then crossed metal lightly and wrote test above it. Words deserve the same tuning the lamp receives. He penciled a centimeter scale beside the bar drawing to remind himself how large absence is. The tail never crossed even half that mark. He wrote centimeter never arrives, and under it, millimeter repeats. Repetition is the room's thesis. He gave it a quiet underline. He shaded pressure to near full again, then deliberately lightened one stroke with an eraser, an honesty ritual to show the box is still allowed to breathe. He resorted the stacks, mechanical, human, atmospheric, and added a fourth, interpretive, containing only a single card. Don't narrate beyond grain. He placed it on top. Cards on top make tempers even. He copied 3:37 a.m., entered 64 degrees, and drew a soft horizon beneath the numbers so they would land somewhere instead of floating. Landing matters. Floating invites poetry. He kept poetry in the margin where it could do no harm. He closed the section by rewriting the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and appending a footnote. Range bracketed, AC, Chuforremelchuram. Pressure almost solid, reflection faint thread, hands empty seat, record-keeping open with +1 in a coin square. He added a small arrow to twin print, morning, and let the reel freewheel 4 seconds before his palm set it still. The room consented to patience without needing to be told. He borrowed a still camera from the next room and photographed the screen at 3 positions: tail north, A, flattened, B, almost return, C. Screen photos are crude witnesses, but witnesses nonetheless. He wrote screen grabs filed and taped each print to the pad with low-tack corners so graphite wouldn't smear. The photos dulled contrast, yet the millimeter behaved. ABC visible like a breath written small. He boxed corroborates and resisted underlining. Underlines warm pages. Nights prefer cool. He checked a microfiche index for house memos the envelope might have missed. Cards slid beneath glass, staffing, supplies, a brief note about extra ushers trained on exits. He copied training emphasized and drew a bracket to management posture. Careful. Care explains many quiet nights. He refused to marry it to +1. He wrote explanations deserve fence. Fences earn sleep. They keep neighbors friendly when morning asks who's to blame. He reviewed lens notes in a separate binder. Focal length standard, stop moderate, no filtration. He traced a triangle from focal length, depth, highlight width. Wider stops fatten specular threads. Moderate stops hold them tight. He wrote highlight calibrates with stop and compared thread thickness after the deflection. It stayed consistent. He shaded reflection one breath darker, acknowledgement without promotion, and left hands pristine. Empty remains a kind of testimony. He tried an audio null, headphones on, left cup slightly lifted, listening for asymmetry that might betray a hidden corridor. The bull's body remained centered. Applause swept with its usual clockwise patience. He wrote center holds and no corridor bias. Bias reveals itself like a coat tugging one shoulder. Both shoulders stood even. He added LFDI in furniture again to keep his future self from hunting drama when furniture is the answer. He reread the usher schedule grid, aligning initials with the shift change at 8:55, and the overflow cards erased 23 to 24. He wrote error encountered and corrected upstream. Upstream corrections lower the odds of downstream heroics. He placed a tiny check beside record keeping, but did not shade. Checks mean presence, not proof. He copied 3:49 a.m. and felt the clock's gentle sarcasm. Late hours prefer nudges over speeches. He performed a quietness test on himself, reading the door paragraph aloud in monotone, then again with warmth. Warmth tried to sell the tale as omen. Monotone kept it air. He wrote voice biases object, and under it stick to museum voice. Museum voice isn't cold, it is temperature controlled. He boxed control lightly. Control isn't a virtue on its own. It's a climate in which small truths don't evaporate. He checked spool tension once more. Take up drag, dancer arm travel. The arm's arc stayed smooth. Drag never tugged cadence. He wrote transport still gentle and sketched a little spring returning to rest, labeled remembered zero. Machines that remember zero make humans braver about millimeters. He added machine trust intact and placed it next to operator steady, so people and tools could share the same line without jealousy. He staged an elsewhere door simulation on the pad. If a different gate opened during applause, what signatures would leak into this frame? Draft-tugging scarves, heads turning, a sliver of distant brightness. He listed 3 tells and checked them against the sequence. None appeared. He wrote elsewhere door absent and drew a dashed rectangle off frame. An empty room kept honest by distance. Distance sometimes tells the most polite truths. He opened a slim ethics memo from the archives, guidance on phrasing when records intersect trauma. Favor verifiable detail, avoid theater. He copied avoid theater and slid the memo under the human stack so its edge peeked out. Edges remind. He looked at +1 again, coin bright, and wrote leave coin unspent tonight. Unspent coins don't vanish. They wait for precise cost. He let the sentence cool until it stopped performing. He built a tension ladder in the margin. Reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping. Rungs labeled from faint to loud. He placed a small dot between pressure and record keeping, refusing to climb farther without the twin print. He wrote dot bound tonight's ceiling. Ceilings protect. He copied 3:57 a.m. and 64 Degrinsian for the faithful chorus. Faithful numbers can feel like friends. He kept friendship off paper and in breath, where it belongs. He closed the section by redrawing the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding a thin arrow outside them, labeled twin print, morning. Pressure nearly filled, reflection thread pale, hands empty chair, record keeping open with one coin in felt. Beneath, he wrote one sentence: millimeter persists, narrative does not. He let the reel coast 3 seconds, stopped it with a palm, and squared the pad to the scorch, keeping north modest. He opened a slim usher pocket card. Personal notes, not official. Snack breaks, a sketchy heart. One line reading, see taped good. He wrote informal echoes formal and placed the card on the human stack without granting it weight. Informal's comfort, they rarely convict. He copied 4:05 a.m. and the steady 64 Mav that felt like a colleague now. He underlined steady once, a courtesy line for a number that kept showing up on time. He rehearsed the night's door verbs. Holds, lifts, settles, remembers, speaking them as if they belong to a single hinge. Verbs behaved better than nouns tonight. He wrote verbs honest and drew a thin rope between pressure and adhesive memory. Rope means cooperation, not conspiracy. He checked the frame again. The tail favored flat, then angled north at rest as if clocking out respectfully. He added manners persist and let the words cool. He revisited alternate gate routes on the pad and penciled tiny feet along aisles beyond camera, then circled 3 points where a traveler would have crossed visible space. Those points exist elsewhere in the footage and stay empty. He wrote crossings audited and no appearances. Audits don't thrill, but they quiet a table. He smoothed the paper edge with his sleeve, a ritual that makes pages feel taller than they are. He ran a contrast bump, lamp a touch brighter, then a soften, lamp a notch lower, to ensure the jam darkening wasn't a creature of settings. The line appeared identically at the same moment in both passes, then refused to repeat. He wrote setting agnostic and boxed single shot again so the box could keep company with itself. Company matters, lone facts stray. He placed a small dot beside the box and didn't name it. He returned to the counter tag and traced the looped numeral that made +1. The graphite groove deepened where the pencil turned, pressure evidence of a hand finishing a long night. He wrote pressure in pencil too, and immediately fenced it from the door's pressure box. Same word, different physics. He copied speech click a final time and left it unshaded, a coat on a chair waiting for morning's weather report. He performed a shadow inventory around Gate C, hat brims, sleeve hems, the rail's lip, listing shapes that could briefly thin a vertical. Each candidate failed distance or angle. He wrote shadows domesticated beside glints domesticated, matching tones so neighbors wouldn't quarrel. Domestic things tidy themselves, the frame obliged by returning to manners. He drew a little house icon as a private joke and crossed it lightly so jokes wouldn't migrate. He compared audio applause grains before and after the tails shift using a crude clap-per-measure count. Counts matched. No hollowness arrived to wear the corridor's coat. He wrote applause count equal and no tunnel. Tunnel is a big word. He left it unboxed to keep it from posing. He let the reel step 3 frames, then 3 back, resetting eyes the way swimmers reset breath between lengths. He inspected edge code cadence one more time. Stars, squares, digits, savoring the comfort of machines speaking rhythm. Rhythm is the enemy of panic. He wrote lab rhythm holds, and below it, no mechanical shove. Shoves are loud. The frames stayed conversational. He drew a minimal metronome in the margin and left its pendulum upright. Upright pendulums make better promises than moving ones when you mean to rest. He tested a silence minute. No film, lamp off, pad closed, to see what thought insisted on existing without picture. Only +1 in millimeter visited. He wrote 2 insistences and felt relief that no ghost invited itself by name. He opened the pad again and placed +1 beneath record keeping and millimeter beneath pressure, pleased that the paper still knew which drawer each word lived in. Drawers, calm rooms. He drafted a morning call script on the margin. Catalog ID, request for the television print, ask for any camera reports. He underlined frames around West's door and added happy to share notes. Sharing makes partners kinder to quirks. He wrote courtesy prepared and copied 4:22 a.m. The hour didn't lean. Hours that don't lean keep witnesses from trying to stand taller than their shoes allow. He closed the section by redrawing the 4 boxes: reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding a narrow bar beneath labeled arithmetic. Inside the bar he wrote paper, mirror 0, counter, mirror me1. Arithmetic isn't a plot. It's a sound a room makes when counting. He shaded pressure nearly solid, left reflection thread pale, hands empty, record keeping open with +1 in felt. He stilled the reel and squared the pad to the scorch, keeping north plane. He drafted a pre-dawn summary on a fresh sheet. Purpose, materials, observations, open items. He wrote in small blocks so each could travel alone if quoted. Under observations, tail deflects 1 meter during applause, no hand, single shot jam density, Row H124. Under open, +1 versus report, twin print. He boxed tone, calm so the day shift wouldn't mistake restraint for doubt. Calm belongs to evidence as much as to beds. He ran a histogram glance. Not a full read, just watching the columns luma while rocking frames. The jam's quick dip nicked values and returned. Surrounding pixels kept their slope. He wrote local dip, not field, and added no bleed. Bleeds betray lighting. Dips whisper material. He let the whisper stand. The lamp stayed trimmed. Film breathed without complaint. He copied 4:29 a.m. and the faithful 64 degrau, both acting like furniture again. He tested mask iris possibilities by narrowing the viewer's aperture slightly, then widening it a hair. Mechanical vignettes darken corners symmetrically. His visitor lived single and vertical. He wrote not vignetting and drew a slender rectangle beside the word, so morning eyes would see the shape first. Shapes communicate faster than adjectives. He kept adjectives off the page unless they earned rent. Ordinary had earned it. Ominous had not. He checked seating manifest against row H map, sold seats, comps, an aisle marker annotated equipment column, view occluded. The occlusion matched his tripod shadow. He wrote manifest agrees and under it no vanishing seat. Vanishings require corridors. Corridors leave echoes and eyes. The bowl had given neither. He breathed once with the machine, grateful for rooms that decline invitations to drama, and let the reel coast 3 seconds before touching still. He reopened the engineer memo and penciled its practical sentence into the margin. Keep fans honest. He drew a gentle arrow from the sentence to pressure and shaded the box shy of full, an intentional imperfection to remind himself certainty is rude near dawn. Rudeness wakes errors. He added adhesive memory below, rope linked as before. Ropes suggest cooperation, not romance. Appliances and tape don't fall in love, they persist. He performed a frame pair subtraction the manual way, overlay on onion skin, one with tail north, one flat, then retraced only what moved. The resulting line was as thin as a pencil hair, exactly where his scale said it should be. He wrote difference Charsters dirt hairline, and paused to enjoy how little the room demanded. Enjoyment is allowed when it sits quietly. He boxed hairline so the word wouldn't try on bravery. He staged a small audience wind test with an index card waved from waist height in the archive's doorway. Absurd, yes, but rituals steady hands. The card's breath against his wrist suggested how applause can be piston, not gale. He wrote piston analogy holds, and under it scale preserved. Preserving scale keeps horror honest. Horror, when present, needs small measurements more than adjectives. He kept adjectives hungry. He returned to audio and counted the micro-rests between clap swells, tiny valleys where bowls inhale. The tail's deflection aligned with one valley, not a peak. He wrote deflect near inhale and circled near so the verb wouldn't puff itself up. Near explains courtesy in materials. It doesn't invent agency. He drew a dot at that valley on his timeline, so morning would see the deference between room and door. He audited tool bias, which tests he liked too much. He listed them: onion skin overlays, breath models, childlike icons. He wrote favorite tools named and drew a fence so favorites wouldn't herd conclusions. Fences, again, buy sleep. He copied 4:41 a.m. and 64 diggy, repetition making a lullaby of numbers. Lullabies belong in pre-dawn archives. They keep pencils from deciding to become knives. He reboxed the quartet, reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and added a thin caption under each. Thread, air law, empty chair, coin. He left record keeping open, coin unspent. Unspent doesn't mean imaginary. It means accounted for, awaiting a receipt. He wrote receipt under twin print and set a paperclip on the request note so it made the smallest click. A miniature rehearsal for a morning phone. He closed the section by aligning pad to scorch mark and the can to pad, making a quiet grid of things that would wait. Grid's calm temper. He wrote one line beneath the grid. Millimeter confirmed. Paper asks morning for the rest. He let the reel breathe 4 seconds free, stopped it with his palm as if settling a bird, and took the first real sip of water all hour, keeping the room's patience intact. He labeled a frame ladder on onion skin, 5 tiny thumbnails bracketing the tail's positions: pre, deflect, near return, steady north, a neutral control. Beneath each, he penciled the real-time offset and a one-word gloss: before, shift, courtesy, home, plane. He wrote ladder filed and slid the sheet into a glassine sleeve so oil from fingers wouldn't change its voice. Voices on paper prefer distance. Touching is for tools and doors, not evidence. He prepared a clip list for morning. Frame ranges to scan, target area cropped to the jam and bar, audio beds annotated where applause inhales. He copied catalog IDs, added deliver as TIFF, and circled no sharpening. Sleepy pictures shouldn't be taught to shout. He wrote export etiquette and underlined etiquette once. Etiquette keeps labs from trying to help too hard. He set the list on top of the envelope under the red clip. He drafted a call card: television print request, contact name, catalog shelf, and a line offering to share notes without presuming conclusions. He wrote ask without leaning. Leaning, in archives, is gravity you choose. He underlined the phone extensions, then added backup. Email in case morning carried a closed door of its own. Doors like to rhyme. He refused the poem. 4:52 a.m. went on the pad, the mercury still 64 to go, polite as always. He assembled a hum map in the margin, wavy lines for fan noise, small peaks for applause swells, dots where the tail settled. Maps that don't pretend to be geography help the day shift catch rhythm without drowning in prose. He wrote hum map shares pace and boxed it lightly so it wouldn't migrate into authority. Authority wears uniforms. This wore cardigan. He breathed once with the fan and felt the map behave. He taped down a do not trim note for the scanning bench. Keep surrounding grain. Include 3 inches of picture left and right of the bar. Context prevents crops from inventing drama. He wrote context saves and drew 2 arrows pointing outward like open hands. Hands open are different from hands in the box. He drew a fence between the words so language couldn't wander from manners into suspects. Fences by good mornings. He cleaned the viewer gate with a fresh swab, collecting a speck of soft black. Machines deserve courtesies when they carry hours. He wrote gate cleared and sketched a tiny broom, then crossed the broom once so drawings wouldn't pretend to be work. Work had been the slow naming of ordinary things. The broom was comfort. He allowed the comfort and wrote comfort named, filing it beside the chain that links system agreements. He resorted the evidence stack: mechanical, viewer tests, lab marks, atmospheric, pressure notes, audio valleys, human, usher logs, counter tag, interpretive, don't narrate beyond grain. On top, he put the twin print request and the ladder. He wrote top, or morning asks, bottom dire night's proofs. Proofs in this room mean repeatable small behaviors, not verdicts. He shaded pressure nearly full again and let the graphite whisper like cloth. He checked the room ledger, a thin notebook near the light switch where shifts sign their hours and tidiest sentence. He entered the time. Reviewed west door sequence, millimeter behavior persists, +1 unresolved, twin requested. He kept adjectives out. He drew a short horizon under the line so the sentence would land. Landed sentences stay where they're placed when email storms begin. He left 1 blank line beneath for morning's hand. He performed 1 last no-note pass at normal speed, hands folded, shoulders easy. The tail lifted, settled, lifted. The jam kept its manners. He wrote repetition intact, and, beneath it, single-shot density unrepeated. Unrepeated things deserve smaller fonts. He kept the letters calm. He copied 5:01 a.m. and let the reel freewheel a soft 5 seconds before touching stillness with his palm, the way you quiet a song without insulting it. He aligned pad, cans, and envelopes into a grid again, leaving the red-clipped request slightly askew so eyes would land there first. He wrote, Trail laid. Archives are scavenger hunts you build for a friend you haven't met yet. He copied 64-degree eyes one final time, then penned room holds. Rooms that hold are witnesses too. Their testimony is a temperature, a hum, a gate that doesn't complain. He let the room keep its voice. He closed the section by redrawing the quartet: reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and adding a thin caption: daylight pending. Reflection stayed thread, pressure nearly solid, hands empty seat, record-keeping open with +1 like a coin waiting for a receipt. Underneath, a single line: night leaves the light on, morning will bring the copy. He switched the lamp off, let the fan spool down, and listened to patience continue without him. First light touched the slit beneath the archive door, a cooler color than the tubes. He copied 5:09 a.m. and the stubborn 64-degree, letting repetition fold the room back into itself. He read the pre-dawn summary once without pen in hand. The sentences held. He wrote summary stands in a small, square hand, then placed the sheet atop the grid so eyes would walk from ask to proofs without tripping. Trails matter when coffee arrives. He rolled a final minute at normal speed, refusing side glances, letting the frame own him. The tail rehearsed, flat, then north at rest, as if clocking out politely. The jam kept its gray. He wrote behavior ordinary at pace, and under it no novelty on fatigue. Fatigue invents. He withheld its tools. He listened for a restless screw, a squeak with opinions. Machines offered only diligence, which he accepted without congratulations. He performed a paper straightening ritual, aligning margins, reseating the glassine sleeves, so chaos later would have to introduce itself. He wrote edges square, square edges slow hurried hands. He placed the call card directly beneath the red clip, penciled 8:30 as the first dial, and 10 diedos as the second. He added if voicemail, leave frames. Frames in voicemail are kindness, not pressure. They give strangers something to hold without promising an ending. He reopened the engineer memo and wrote its sentence on the pad's margin one last time. Keep fans honest. He drew a rope from pressure to the sentence and from the sentence to adhesive memory, a small triangle of cooperation. Triangles hold. He resisted drawing a fourth side labeled hands. Empty chairs are part of geometry, too. He shaded pressure a touch darker, then lifted the pencil to prove shading could stop. He tried a lamp-off listen, eyes closed, counting the archive's heartbeat, ballast hum, fan's tail, hallway air threading the door seam. Nothing in the sound asked for drama. He wrote silence confirms scale, and under it, no corridor vowel once more. Not as echo, but as maintenance. Maintenance of language keeps meaning aligned. He reopened the lamp and let the picture bloom back without ceremony, like a held breath let go. He made a courtesy mark for morning on the room ledger, a tiny modquern beside his line to be filled when the twin print lands. He wrote box expects reply. Expecting is not leaning, it is leaving a chair out. He filled the pen with 2 more words. Thanks pending. Thanks that arrive with the copy will feel earned, not prophetic. He left the ledger open so the square would greet the first set of eyes. He ran a contrast pair, once at the deflection, once 2 minutes later, then overlapped onion skins to confirm his millimeter scale still matched after sleep threats. It did. He wrote scale survives dawn and drew a pencil hair across AB again, resisting the urge to darken it for clarity. Clarity by force is theater. He boxed hairline in the same thin weight, preserving the courteous distance between diagram and conviction. He reviewed the interpretive card on top, don't narrate beyond grain, and copied it verbatim at the bottom of today's pad page. Redundancy here was not waste, it was ballast. He wrote, ballast added. Nights lean toward metaphor when candles get low. Morning needs ballast more than music. He slid the card half under the pad so a visible edge would mutter the rule, even if no one read it aloud. He taped a small arrow flag onto the envelope pointing to twin print request and wrote priority, gentle. Priority can bully. Gentle keeps conversations open. He added happy to host on the call card, inviting the partner to use this room if their scanner sleeps. Rooms that share get smarter. He copied 5:24 a.m. and the faithful 64 degree, then underlined neither. Underlines are for nights. Morning prefers unembellished nouns. He checked the latch rectangle one last time, sketching a micro-tick at the tail's north rest so scale wouldn't drift in memory between now and noon. He wrote north rest marked, and beneath, A, B, C retained. Retention is a promise to future readers, including himself in 7 hours. He breathed once with the fan, then pressed palm to knob until stillness arrived clean, like a period that doesn't argue with the sentence. He closed the section by redrawing the quartet, reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and adding a caption, requests in flight. Reflection remained a thread, pressure near solid, hands the empty seat, record-keeping open with +1 poised like a coin awaiting a receipt. Beneath, a single line for the day shift, millimeter confirmed, tail courteous, +1 human until proved otherwise, twin en route. He left the light off and the grid intact, asking the room to hold. The day shift's shoes arrived first, rubber soles, low voices. He pointed to the grid, ask on top, proofs beneath. Coffee made a soft sentence in the hallway. He read his summary once, then handed the call card across with the catalog ID underlined. Television print, he said, museum quiet. The new archivist nodded, wrote the time, and dialed. He added a tiny checkbox beside requests in flight on the pad, leaving it empty on purpose. The partner archive called back by 8:41. They had the TV print and could courier a reel. He wrote twin en route, then, smaller, be kind to its splices. Twins don't match every freckle. He underlined frames around west door on the list so scanners would aim true. The room, brighter now, didn't change its scale. Brightness is not argument. It's lighting. He breathed once and let the machinery's politeness reset his shoulders. He prepped the scan bench, calibrated light, leveled carrier, test slate captured. He taped his do not trim note where hands would land first. He wrote context preserved beside a little outward arrow sketch, palms open. Open palms stop evidence from shrinking into anecdotes. He logged the bench temperature and lamp hours for completeness, then marked a neat box. Await twin. Boxes that wait make impatience glance at its shoes and consider leaving. Courier arrived with a gray can and a paper band that read, television copy, handle. He wrote seal intact and set the can on felt. The partner's paperwork wrote inside, strike date, print lab, a pleasant good luck with your door. He copied good luck on the pad, then crossed luck with a single line so method could be read beneath. Luck may open doors. Method closes arguments. He threaded the twin after a quick leader check. Edge codes correct, splices neat, no audible squeaks from old glue. The light rose to a careful level. Crowd bed felt slightly brighter. Television likes buoyant pictures. He wrote tonal bias, TV, and drew a fence so bias wouldn't trespass into verdict. He rolled to the west side and stopped on gate C tape present. Tail angled, north. He let a plain breath mark the line. He walked the familiar deflection window using his earlier offsets, converting for this print's leader notes. Applause rose. A valley arrived. The tail flattened the same restrained AB, then considered C and nearly returned. He wrote twin millimeter common present, and under it timing near inhale. He didn't underline. Underlines are small celebrations. He kept celebration in breath only. He added no hand before his pencil could enjoy itself too much. He checked for the single-shot jam density. Quarter speed, lamp nudged. There, the slim vertical change, living in one frame's weather, not the neighbor's. He wrote density transient repeats, and, in smaller script, not a clone. A cousin, TV's grain carried the same event in its house voice. He boxed event class confirmed. Classes of events matter more than personalities when rooms try to trick story out of quiet pictures. He ran a side-by-side, onion skins from both prints pinned at the hinge. Rocked together, the AB delta landed within his millimeter ladder. The density tick appeared in both stacks at the same applause valley. He wrote agreement across stock and no lab artifact. Agreement isn't triumph, it's subtraction. Subtracting bad explanations leaves smaller, stronger ones. He shaded pressure fully for the first time, then erased one stroke. Ritual humility. He compared row H in the twin. Head count column still 2424, 2424. The boy in the cap existed here too. Ribbon where boat once lived. He wrote H faithful, TV. Not surprised, just grateful. He checked the whistle. It threaded twice in this copy too. He wrote audio behavior matches and LF furniture intact. Furniture repeats across houses when it's real. He let the repetition relax his jaw, then tightened the handwriting again. He added a new line under record keeping. +1 remains human. Twins can't fix hands, they can fix film. He drew the coin square again and left it open, then noted counter posture risk, completion click, in tidy daytime script for colleagues. Day scripts wear uniforms better than night's pencil. He copied 10:26 a.m. and the archive's 68-degree Av. Now that air conditioning remembered the sun. He drew a small arrow to note the change. He closed the section by redrawing the quartet, reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and for the first time writing beneath, pressure, cause of tail, reflection, adjunct thread, hands, none seen, record keeping, Chapter 1 unexplained. He added twin corroborates in a modest box. Modest boxes travel better than banners. He set the twin can beside the original, like siblings at a lunch table, and let the room keep being ordinary. He laid both pads side by side, night pencil and day script, and wrote a reconciliation. Film behaviors, audio behaviors, mechanical tests, human records. Under film, he listed AB, Bark 1 MN, near C, single-shot density, present on both prints. Under audio, valley near inhale. Under mechanical, transport gentle, no vignette, no weave. Under human, +1 against report. He boxed conclusion scope so it wouldn't wander into story. Scope is a fence you thank later. He prepared a short memo for the file. Tail behavior consistent with pressure differential. No hand observed. Single frame jam density appears on both prints. Row H stable. Counter tag +1 remains unexplained. He set verbs small, nouns plain. Plain verbs survive committee. He added attachments. Onion skins, contact ladders, scan frames, hum map. He wrote copies filed and slipped a duplicate into partner archive mail. Copies make futures kinder to pasts. He called the partner to thank them and, while the scanner idled, asked for any camera reports beyond the leader scribble. A pause then. Nothing additional, only a note that camera 2 stood high and center, a detail he already owned. He wrote no new camera lore. Lore loves gaps, the day offered none. He copied the time and a small weather note, outside warming, inside 68 degrees, so the page would remember the hour's temperature. He opened the usher roster, found initials for the stage doorpost, and wrote a gentle request. If comfortable, can you describe end-of-night counting posture? He kept posture as the word. Posture asks about wrists, not fault. Blame is a loud machine. Posture is a chair. He sealed the envelope, set it in the outgoing tray, and penciled courtesy sent. Courtesy is a quiet witness. It keeps phones from sounding like subpoenas. He revisited the egress plan and wrote a marginal line. Locked for show, held shut, bar spring stiff, tape fresh. He attached the engineer's memo, keep fans honest, with a little rope drawn between clips. Ropes mean cooperation, not romance. He shaded pressure fully, then lifted the graphite with an eraser stroke to remind himself even full boxes shouldn't swagger. Swagger turns millimeters into proclamations. The door kept its manners while he wrote. He drafted a reader-facing caption for the scan set. West door, gate C. Tape tail shown at rest and during applause valley. No hand observed. Captions are promises about what frames will and will not do. He added context preserved and no sharpening, protecting grain from helpfulness. He placed the caption atop the scan request where the text would land first. Landing pads keep speed from inventing conclusions. He made a timeline braid, film, paper, air, now that the twin had spoken. The braid held 3 beads, millimeter, transient density, +1. He wrote, air explains millimeter, stock agrees on density, paper keeps coin. He drew a tiny purse beside coin, then crossed the purse. Metaphors solicit theft. He let the braid end without a bow. Bows dress findings. Findings should arrive in work clothes and remain unperfumed. He recorded a plain language summary for the case log. Door breathed with room. No evidence of entry. Counting discrepancy, likely human artifact. Further interviews pending. Plain language survives travel between departments. He initialed, dated, and slid the sheet under the top clip. He did not write solved. Archives dislike solved. They prefer held. He wrote held in the side column, a word that treats time like furniture, not a stage. He performed a final double vision test. Eyes relaxed until lines doubled, to ensure his own vision hadn't lent wobble to the jam. The doubled world remained symmetric. The door's column stayed centered. He wrote eye check cleared. He copied temperature 68 degree yard and HVAC steady. He drew a small square for quiet and filled it black. Quiet is not absence. It is evidence that did its job without talking loudly. He stacked mechanical proofs, transport, optics, atmospheric proofs, valley alignment, engineer memo, and human materials, +1, logs, roster, into a 3-step tower, top to bottom, lab, air, hands. He wrote tower assembled and left the top 2 blocks inked. The bottom stayed pencil, erasable until posture letters returned. He underlined erasable. Erasable invites humility. The tail, in the frame beyond his pad, returned to north and waited. He closed the section by redrawing the quartet, reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, and writing a 1-line daylight conclusion beneath. Pressure accounts for tail. Reflection attends. Hands absent. Record-keeping holds a coin. Interviews to come. He aligned pad to scorch, cans to pad, and the twin beside the original like a calm agreement. Agreements here are quiet contracts. You keep your millimeter. We keep our nouns small. He let the room breathe. 2 replies arrived before lunch, short posture letters from ushers whose initials matched the roster. Each described end-of-night habits, a last look at aisles, a nod to the stage door, a click to mark done rather than a person. Both used that word, done. He wrote completion click confirmed and kept the box unshaded. Confirmation isn't a gavel. He placed the letters on the human stack and underlined wrists remember language in a small, ordinary hand. A third note, careful cursive, mentioned tying the counter tag before walking the corridor. Sometimes after the last word. He copied after last word beside speech click and left a tiny square for doubt. Doubt keeps pencils polite. The writer also remembered gate C taped like always. He wrote habit remembered and drew a soft circle around always so it wouldn't pretend to be evidence. Habits testify. They don't swear. He phoned one usher who preferred speaking to letters. The voice was unfussy. You count to be finished, the man said, and sometimes you count the finish. He wrote count the finish, a phrase that held both kindness and risk. The man added that he never broke tape. The bar had good spring. He copied good spring next to bar springs stiff from maintenance, pleased when 2 mouths share a noun without meaning to agree. He reopened the counter tag and searched the pencil loop's pressure for hesitation, any tremor that would imply uncertainty. The graphite groove looked smooth, a confident turn at the top of the +1. He wrote, stroke assured. Assured doesn't equal accurate, but it draws a map toward posture rather than malice. He fenced the word from pressure in the airbox. Same letters, different physics. Fences stop rhymes from seducing conclusions. A house manager returned his call and confirmed the shift change note. Fresh eyes at 8:55. Reminders to verify tape visually, not by assumption. He wrote verify visually and drew a small I beside the line, then crossed it once so icons wouldn't masquerade as logs. The manager remembered the west door, quiet that week, a phrase he copied as quiet remembered and placed beside quiet holds, echoes in language that behave like furniture. He ran a courtesy rescan of the key window while the copier warmed. Both prints again, side by side. The tale rehearsed ABC like a musician tuning. He wrote rehearsal consistent and allowed himself one shallow breath of satisfaction, then boxed satisfaction named so it wouldn't become ballast. Ballast belongs to facts, not hearts. He filed the new frames under public set for any future committee that prefers pictures to sentences. A reply from the engineer landed by email. Pressure balance, within expected variance. Fans kept to low-medium. No unscheduled adjustments. He wrote variance ordinary and rope-linked it to adhesive memory, then to applause valley. Ropes imply cooperation, not romance. He repeated that rule to himself softly. He shaded pressure full and, ritual humility, lifted a stroke with the eraser. Full boxes should breathe. Breathing keeps millimeters from dressing as banners. He assembled a plain words capsule for the file drawer most people open first. Both prints show a brief millimeter tail deflection aligned to applause inhale, single-frame jam darkening repeats, no hand observed, counting +1 likely completion click, confirm in future interviews if any. He wrote likely decided and circled the symbol, a reminder that arithmetic deserves patience when fingers translate speech. He slid the capsule into the front so daylight finds it without hunting. He compared ink tones on the letters, 2 blue, 1 black, dates consistent, folds earnest, no whiff of coordination. He wrote accounts independent and under it agreement accidental. Accidents can be truer than choruses. He set the 3 notes like a small triptych above the pad's coin square. The square still held +1 like a coin on felt. He refused to shade record keeping. Some squares must remain invitations, not destinations. He walked a last-pass ritual across the door with a neutral eye. Rail, arrows, jam, bar, tape. The tail lifted a breath's worth, settled, almost remembered north, then remembered. He wrote manners continue and under it no invitation to revise. Revision without cause is theater. The room deserved museum tone. He taped a copy of the door sketch, Tix 06 ABC, to the inside lid of the can, a map that travels. He closed the section by redrawing the quartet, reflection, pressure, hands, record keeping, and adding beneath, hands, none at door, hands, present in counting. He shaded pressure to full, left reflection thread pale, hands split by a thin divider, door, ledger, record-keeping open with +1 coin unspent but plausibly spoken. Underneath, 1 line for the case log. Door stayed ordinary. Wrists told the surplus. He squared pad to scorch and let the room rest. He wrote a closing memo in the file's front pocket. 2 prints agree on a millimeter tail deflection aligned to applause inhale. Single-frame jam density present. No hand observed. Counter tag +1 likely completion click. Interviews filed. He kept verbs small so they would travel. He added attachments, onion skins, contact ladders, scan frames, posture letters. He initialed, dated, and drew a small horizon under the last line so the sentence would land instead of perform. He set the original can on felt, label outward, then the twin beside it like siblings who understood each other without insisting. He taped the door sketch, Tix 06 ABC, inside each lid so pictures and numbers would begin together next time. He wrote, rejoin shelf, west corridor, and a quiet note for future hands. Leave grain alone. It tells the truth. Truth here was modest. Pressure, courtesy, wrists remembering language. He aligned the scan set for export, tiffs with surrounding grain, no sharpening, Captions simple. He wrote context preserved and placed the hum map on top, a pace guide more than a diagram. Paces keep readers from outrunning small facts. He copied temperature 68 degrees, HVAC steady, and, out of respect for the night, added one line in pencil. 64 degrees kept vigil. Vigil belongs to rooms. Credit is the only ceremony permitted. He redrew the quartet. Reflection, pressure, hands, record-keeping, for the last time. Reflection remained a pale thread. Pressure sat full. A box allowed to breathe by one erased stroke. Hands split. Door, ash, empty seat. Ledger, yash present. Record-keeping stayed open with +1 resting like a coin on felt. Acknowledged, unspent, accounted for. Beneath he wrote, door ordinary, air lawful, wrists kind, paper honest. He let the sentence cool into work clothes. He added a short reader card to the file spine. Gate C. Behavior explained by air. Count discrepancy, likely posture. C scans, para 4, 12 tos, 15. Cards keep daylight from getting lost. He slid it into the sleeve where fingers land first, then turned the can's latch with the soft pressure that announces respect. Metal replied with a balanced click, the kind of sound that neither argues nor apologizes. He wrote closures behave in the margin and moved on. He entered the catalog line in the ledger. Shelf, can, attachments, partner loan returned on schedule. He copied twin corroborates, no hand. He resisted the theatrical temptation to write solved. Archives dislike that word. He wrote held instead, a noun that keeps time like furniture. Furniture isn't inert. It remembers weight politely. He drew a tiny chair beneath held because chairs had helped make sense of hands tonight. He phoned the partner archive to close the loop. Thanks sent, scan samples shared, notes offered. He wrote courtesy returned, and because it matters, method, luck. Luck had been crossed out earlier so method could stand. Crossing luck again would be theater. He let the receiver settle into its cradle and enjoyed the mechanical honesty of a phone that still sounded like a phone. Honest sounds are witnesses too. He stood at the viewer and let one no-note minute pass with the lamp off, listening to the ballast's small hymn and the room's mild air. He wrote quiet, carried, and shaded a tiny square black beside the word. Quiet isn't absence. It's a job well done by a room and its machines. He touched the gate with a fingertip like you thank a doorframe on your way out of a childhood house. He copied a final sentence to the pad for the next reader. Watch the tale practice ABC. Listen for applause inhale. Keep nouns small. Don't spend the coin. He signed initials small enough not to matter and set the pad square to the scorch mark. Scorches are local history. Honest mistakes recorded in wood. He underlined local once so the case would remember where it lived when it travels to other desks. He rolled the frame of rest one last time. Tape tail settled north, satin thread quiet, latch rectangle true. He let the image hold for a breath beyond comfort, then still longer, until the breath became ordinary again. Ordinary is a verdict here. He wrote final image chosen and closed the shutters on the viewer, the sound like cloth folding. Cloth sounds end stories better than drums when millimeters are the star. At the door, he looked back once at the table's grid, cans, pads, pens, aligned like lanes that won't braid. The room had told him everything it could. Air law, adhesive courtesy, human wrists counting the finish. The only thing left to watch was something film will never show. Which way the tale chooses in an empty bowl when no one claps. He let that stay unfilmed. He turned the key, and the archive kept breathing. Thanks for staying with me tonight. I'm going to leave the room the way I found it. Lights low, stories filed. If you're still awake, tell me your city plus local time for the night map. If anything needs a citation or correction, leave a polite note with a source, and I'll update the description. If this helped you rest, tapping subscribe keeps these long chapters coming, and a quick tells me to make more single-story nights. Want another? I'll queue up the next archive. When you're ready, let the room stay quiet and follow me there.